Welcome to this explainer. When you really step back and look at the sheer scale of China's history, it is just absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, we're talking about 5,000 continuous years of civilization here. But here's the thing, it's not just a straight upward line of progress. It's actually the story of a cyclical empire. It's totally defined by these brutal, meteoric rises to immense power, followed by golden ages of just unimaginable wealth, and then catastrophic earth-shattering falls. To truly understand the global superpower we see today, we've really got to understand the epic loop of its past.
Okay, let's dive into this. Today we're breaking things down into 5 parts. 1. The mandate of heaven. 2. Forging a unified empire. 3. Golden ages and inventions. 4. The Mongol conquest. And finally, 5. The final dynasties.
So, Section 1, the mandate of heaven, the rulebook for imperial survival. This rulebook was basically forged way back after early settlements finally tamed the Yellow River floods, but it got its true test during the cruel, really hedonistic decay of Emperor Ji. Now, this concept is the absolute spine of Chinese history, the mandate of heaven. It essentially states that heaven grants noble men the right to rule, but, and this is the catch, it ensures that wicked, unjust leaders will be overthrown. So when Emperor Ji's hedonism really peaked, the Shang dynasty used newly forged bronze weapons to overthrow him, claiming, hey, he lost the mandate. Under the Shang, we see some incredible advancements, represented perfectly by the number 3,000. That's actually the number of documented characters found on Shang oracle bones. These were usually turtle shells or animal bones used by priests, and they gave China its very first written history. But the Shang are also deeply brutal. Their culture relied heavily on burying slaves alive with their masters and committing mass human sacrifices to appease the gods. So ultimately, their last emperor fell into the exact same debauchery as Jie, and the mandate shifted once again, this time over to the Zhou dynasty. And this brilliantly illustrates what happened next. During the Zhou dynasty's massive 789-year reign, centralized power eventually crumbled. But that chaos sparked a golden age of intellectual thought. 3 massive schools emerged, acting as the cultural DNA for China's competing ideologies of statecraft. We've got Confucianism, prioritizing family hierarchy and justice, legalism, which argues humans are inherently bad and need strict, harsh control, and Taoism, focusing on a natural harmony, just going with the flow of the universe. Which brings us to Section 2, forging a unified empire. Blood, centralization, and a great wall. This era emerged right out of the chaotic, cutthroat warring states period. Literally the very crucible that produced Sun Tzu's famous art of war. Out of all the bloodshed of those warring states, one ruthless state emerged victorious, the Qin. In 221 BCE, Yingzheng unified the territory and named himself Qin Shi Huang, becoming the first true emperor of a united China. And he was a strict legalist. He completely centralized power, standardized the currency in writing, and started forcing peasant laborers to build what would eventually become the Great Wall to keep out northern nomads. So, the crucial point here is the number 15. The incredibly pivotal Qin dynasty only lasted 15 short years. Why? Well, because Yingzheng became obsessively paranoid about dying. In this totally ironic, desperate quest for immortality, he started taking alchemical potions packed with high levels of mercury. He literally poisoned himself. But he made absolutely sure he was ready for the afterlife, taking a massive terracotta army built by 700,000 workers to the grave with him. His death almost instantly sparked mass revolts. Out of those revolts came a peasant named Liu Bang, who seized the mandate and kicked off the Han dynasty. Where the Qin relied on ruthless legalism and fear, the Han went ahead and revived Confucianism. They lowered taxes, freed slaves, and honestly, most importantly, they established a merit-based civil service. This meant educated men, rather than just the well-connected guys, were actually running the government. This brilliant move allowed the Han to rule for 400 years, eventually opening up the legendary Silk Road trade route. Moving right along to Section 3, Golden Ages and Inventions, Wealth, Poetry, and Explosive Discoveries. Following the Han's collapse, we see these bizarre decays of leadership. Think emperors using goat-drawn carts to randomly select which concubine to visit. But that chaos paved the way for a mighty new era. Under Emperor Taizong, China entered a seriously cosmopolitan golden age. The Tang capital city swelled 2 million people, absolutely buzzing with art, poetry, and diverse religions. But this incredible era was brutally interrupted in 755 AD by the An Lushan Rebellion. It was actually one of the deadliest wars in human history, plunging the nation into such desperate starvation that mass cannibalism broke out at the siege of Suyang. The tanks survived it, but man, they were permanently weakened. Now, what's really interesting here is that amidst all this chaos, we get one of history's biggest accidents. In 850 AD, Tang dynasty monks, acting as alchemists, were mixing saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur, desperately trying to find an elixir for a long lifespan. Instead, they scorched their own skin and accidentally burned their monastery straight to the ground. They had, completely by accident, just invented gunpowder. By the time the Song dynasty reunified China, they took that gunpowder and revolutionized the whole world. The Southern Song achieved just an incredible list of global firsts: the first paper money, magnetic compasses for navigation, catapults launching gunpowder bombs. Throw in a massive boom in agriculture and a revival of Neo-Confucianism, and it launched them into an absolute technological zenith. Yet, despite all these literal world-changing inventions, they possessed a fatal flaw. They were militarily weak and totally isolated. And that military weakness leads us straight into Section 4, the Mongol conquest. The mandate shifts to outsiders. This massive shift was driven by the trauma and, frankly, the brilliant ruthlessness of a young, abandoned outcast named Temujin, a man you probably know as Genghis Khan. The sheer, terrifying scale of Genghis Khan's conquest is perfectly captured by this staggering number: 40 million. That's the estimated death toll attributed to Genghis and his armies. His forces breached the Great Wall of China using intense psychological warfare, pillaging, and total annihilation tactics. I mean, entire civilian populations were slaughtered if they didn't surrender immediately. It was an overwhelming display of force that completely shattered the existing Chinese dynasties. After Genghis's death, his grandson Kublai Khan finished the job, establishing the Yuan dynasty. To maintain control as a non-native ruler, he implemented a hyper-strict ethnic caste system. The Mongols held all true power at the very top, while the ethnically Chinese citizens were forced to the absolute bottom. It was so restrictive that Chinese citizens couldn't legally own weapons or even dogs, just to prevent them from staging any kind of revolt. Now, the Yuan dynasty did open up trade significantly. This was actually the era when Marco Polo visited, but their rule was cut incredibly short by a biological terror. 13 million people in China died from the bubonic plague in the 1330s. The Black Death actually originated among Mongol soldiers and just ravaged the country. The devastating combination of this horrifying plague, widespread famine, and rampant discrimination finally pushed the Chinese to form the Red Turban Rebellion, violently driving the Mongols out of China for good. Which brings us to Section 5, the final dynasties: expansion, isolation, and collapse. After ousting the Mongols, the new Ming dynasty restored Han culture and built the iconic stone sections of the Great Wall we know today. But they ruled with an intense, paranoid brutality that ultimately led to their own collapse. As the Ming crumbled, yet another outsider force, the Manchus from the northeast, swooped in and seized the mandate of heaven, establishing the Qing dynasty. To immediately enforce cultural submission, they mandated the Q hairstyle. Every single Chinese man had to shave the front of his head and grow the back out into a long braid. Refusing to wear your hair exactly like this was actually seen as an act of treason, and it was punishable by death. Let's move to the 1800s and see how this builds, because the Qing dynasty soon faced an enemy unlike any nomadic tribe: Western imperialism. Great Britain desperately wanted Chinese tea and silk, and began illegally smuggling opium into China to pay for it. When Chinese officials finally destroyed the opium, it sparked the First Opium War. The resulting unequal treaties handed Britain vast wealth and total control of Hong Kong, while leaving China addicted, economically drained, and frankly, utterly humiliated. The social decay from those opium wars triggered one of the most bizarre and bloody civil wars in all of human history, the Taiping Rebellion. It was led by a man named Hong Xiuquan. After failing his civil service exams and having a massive mental breakdown, he became entirely convinced that he was the younger brother of Jesus Christ. He militarized a cult that swept right across southern China. The resulting warfare and famine led to a staggering 20 to 30 million deaths. This absolutely crippled the Qing dynasty right as Western powers were returning for a second opium war. Which brings us to the ultimate question as we wrap up. Can a civilization that has survived 5,000 years of this brutal, cyclical history continue on into the modern era? We've watched the mandate of heaven shift through catastrophic floods, incredible philosophical awakenings, horrific wars, brilliant inventions, and foreign occupations. The sheer endurance of the Chinese state is practically breathtaking. It really forces us to wonder, as we watch China today, are we simply witnessing the newest chapter in an ancient, unbreakable cycle? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for exploring this with me.